Please make it so Jungle Main can be free from Mastermind jail. Yeah, that would be nice. Um, all right, so
This
let's
will allow us
play
to
the
monitor
video.
and make adjustments before it
Anyway,
replaces
so yeah,
the
so like this is
existing
saying,
Wild Rift map
a
fully
lot of
in our
benefits here to
pre-season
doing separate
repatch
queue.
3.3 later
Uh,
this year.
we're
Until
going to be
then,
looking for
enjoy the
feedback for
current
sure.
Rift in ranked and esports broadcasts as we head towards the Icons Global Championship. And again, we're exploring versions of Elemental Rift that might look different from this one, or even from what's currently in League PC. Expect to hear more about that in the future.
Let's be clear about that. We're exploring different, very significant differences, so we'll see what that looks like.
We're looking forward to seeing
Roguefool's doing that. Ask him. Yeah, barrage him in the chat with your questions
games play
about
out
crazy
with
things,
raw
although he's obviously not
elemental
going to tell you
power
what
at
he's
your
trying.
disposal, and we can't
But he
wait
can
to
tell
hear
you
your
that
feedback on these changes when they
he's been
roll
trying
out for
some
testing.
pretty different stuff.
Shen, the Eye of Twilight, will be teleporting in very soon.
Shen, Pog.
Shen wields his blades of steel and spirit to protect Ionia and its allies in the Barren Lane. His spirit blade follows him and grants him more damage against his foes and protection when his team needs
This
it
is me in
most.
playtests.
Shen isn't a particularly stealthy Kinku, but he makes up for it with defensive options and hard crowd control. Slide on into the enemy team to taunt them and block basic attacks with Spirit's Refuge to nullify enemy carries.
River
With
Shen, let's
extreme
go.
tankiness
I actually
and
played some
ability
Jungle
to
Shen
stand
games
united with
in
allies
tests. I
anywhere on the map, Shen
I was pretty
maintains the balance
successful.
of his team
I did feel like the
and
clear
his
was a little slower than maybe it needs to
tipping
be.
the scales in support and
Do you feel like Shen on Wild could work as support? I had some decent success with it. I only played it a couple times in testing though.
Karma has a
I
couple
think
of
actually maybe
changes
just
from her
one
PC
time.
version, with a greater focus on her battle
Who's your
maze
fave champ?
playstyle.
In Wild
We
Rift,
thought
it's
we'd go
certainly
into a little more
TF.
detail with Karma to
I'm not
highlight
sure
some
who
of
it is
her
in PC.
differences.
Probably Volibear.
First up, we've moved Karma's ultimate to her passive.
I love TF
Every
though.
spell Karma casts, she gains a stack of mantra, and at 3 stacks, her next ability is empowered. Inner Flame fires a blast of energy, dealing damage and slowing enemies. When empowered, it leaves a slow field, which explodes a second time. Focused Resolve now tethers up to 2 nearby champions.
2
If those
tethers?
champions fail to escape the tether range, they're rooted for a short time. When empowered, this ability forms an additional tether, forcing
The
the
targeting
enemies
is
to
just,
scatter.
it's automatic
Any of the
for
tethers
the new
aren't
Karma
broken in
W.
time, the
You
enemies
don't
get
pick a
mega
target.
root for a
That's
longer
part of
period.
why there was
Karma's
motivation to
third
have it
ability,
tether 2 targets so that
Inspire, grants an
it's
ally
easier.
a shield that offers movement speed. Under the effect of mantra, the shield could empower an additional nearby ally. Finally, Karma's brand new ultimate, Transcendent Embrace, forms a ring of spirit energy,
The donut.
dealing damage, slowing and knocking enemies into the center if they're caught on the edge. We want to give Karma players more ways to control her enemies throughout
Yes,
the
it's like
game,
Morgult.
and Transcendent Embrace is the centerpiece of that playstyle. In testing, we called it the donut.
By the way, that's not a joke. He said in testing we called it the donut. I like literally dozens of times I've like said things like, "Have you seen the donut?" or "Donut Karma," stuff like that. There are a lot of like, especially in the game analysis team channels, there are a lot of just spamming of like donut emotes. Whenever people were talking about Karma, is a great time. But I can tell you, for someone asking about the process in the new Karma ult, if you look at if you go back and you watch the Ruination cinematic, the original the designer who made this 2020 cinematic, that was where that spell came from. It's actually just directly inspired by that cinematic where she makes the donut in the cinematic.
More ways to control her enemies throughout the game, and Transcendent Embrace is the centerpiece of that playstyle. In testing, we called it the donut. While this year is starting off a little quieter, we're going to ramp up the amount of champs later in 2022, and we wanted to give you a small taste of who you can expect. This year, we've started with Peace, Harmony, and Fluffy Cats. But 2022 is the year of the Edgelord. Later this year, we'll be revisiting some battle-scarred locations in Runeterra. Next up, we're heading to Zorn, Bilgewater, and Noxus. Nothing personal here. We'll see you there.
That was such a great clip. I'm not going to talk about that one, by the way. I definitely am not saying anything about the champs upcoming or anything like that.
So we're focusing on competition, social play, skill, and challenge. That sounds pretty broad, but giving you more freedom and skill expression in your games is a huge part of that effort. And of course, keeping the game balanced is a top priority too. We're giving more options to fighters in this patch with the introduction of new items. Divine Sunderer is the perfect option for champs looking to brawl who want some extra health and damage. We want to offer a sturdier alternative for bruisers that traditionally build Trinity Force. After using an ability, your next basic attack will deal a percent of your target's maximum health as bonus damage. If that target is another champion,
The set use W
you will
so
also
late.
heal for some of the damage you dealt. Hullbreaker is for champs who want more durability and split-pushing power. While no allied champions
I have had a
you,
great time
you'll
playing
gain bonus
Hullbreaker and
armor
testing.
and magic resist, and deal more damage against structures.
As has the original
You'll also
designer.
give a mini boost to nearby minions, so they can keep you company on your split-pushing journey. Also in this patch, we're making some small changes to other items. Fimbulwinter will be more closely aligned with its PC.
Ever thought of adding some mythics for
offering
PC
its
as legendary
trademark
items in
shield
Wild Rift?
on
That's literally
swords
what's
as
happening
well
in the
as
video
on ground
here. There's
control.
Divine Sunder in this video right now.
This stance is
Yes.
becoming an AD armor item, as we felt that there were too many unimpactful choices offered by the AD and health items in Wild Rift. Fulfilling its original intended purpose, we're reworking Solari Charge Blaze passive to make it more appealing to monks. Hextech Mega Drive is getting.
Can you actually tell what the new Solari Charge Blade does in this video? I don't think you can. No, there's like nothing that tells you what the new one does.
To make it more appealing to monks. Hextech Mega Drive is getting a significant buff for champions that can pull off several stuns at once.
Okay, let me catch up a little bit with chat. Aren't bruisers traditionally building Black Cleaver and not Trinity Force? At least so it appears in competitive. Yeah, I mean, there's been a few. There's been some competitive, a little bit of shifts recently in competitive towards like a few more Triforces. Or at least I've seen Triforce a little bit more commonly over the last like weekend, like week or two of competitive. But yeah, that's true. But I mean, keep in mind, number one, these videos are made way ahead of time, and like the scripts are written for these videos like way ahead of time. So they made this video like I'm sure the script for this video was written like more than a month ago. So like they start writing these scripts like way out, like way before Cleaver became like the dominant pick. And it's like, you know, it's a small thing. They're not gonna like just change it. You know, like what does it really matter, right? Anyway. Let's see. Is there any plans changing my beloved Manmian and Muramana? I would like to change more towards the PC version. I like the PC versions more, but there's no plans to do that right now, especially because that space kind of conflicts with Essence Reaver a little bit, unfortunately. So we'd probably, if we wanted to make changes to go more like PC's version of Manamine, we'd probably also need to either do PC's version of Essence Reaver, or we'd need to do some other direction for Essence Reaver to sort of open that space up. We kind of have like a kind of a, honestly kind of a unfortunate like weird conflict of spaces there with some of the items. I don't know why I did this motion. That doesn't seem helpful, but whatever. There's like kind of some weird conflicts with the spaces, so unfortunate. Isn't the champion dev team want Karma as battle mage? Why does she perform worse in mid support? I'm not necessarily saying that she can't be played mid. I'm saying that when I played her in testing, I was more successful support. Not necessarily saying that other people couldn't be successful in mid lane or whatever. But that was my general thought, was like I found her to be more powerful in support with the way that she's tuned, and that's something that Champ's team seemed happy with. So let's see. Will you change Iceborne Gauntlet to Frostfire Gauntlet? Maybe at some point. I personally would like to. I actually don't mind Iceborne personally. Like I think having a sheet, like an armor sheen item, is actually totally fine. I could see doing Frostfire as like as like a separate item, but it would have to have a different passive, obviously. Let's see. Can you give us more info on how new Solari Charge Blade works? No, I can't. I'm not going to tell you anything other than the fact that it's not going to give you conditional 50% crit. But my testing, it was still quite strong on Tryndamere and Yasuo. Obviously, I mean it's still a crit item. I'm not gonna, it still has crit on it, and so it's still intended for crit-based champions. Now Solari only works on Kaisa. Yeah. It actually says the unique passive says if you are not Kaisa, this item doesn't do anything. Let me play this here.
Morgana or Alistar. Pulling off the perfect CC chain could mean you get to cast your active item multiple times in a fight.
Boom.
In
Look at that auto
to a
attack.
whole host of items, we wanted to take a close look at the support role. We know supports have needed more love for a while, so in this update, we're rebalancing support
Summoner spell changes
spells to give players more active options in the laning phase and in teamfights.
Hype?
First, we're strengthening the initial slow on exhaust to give more offensive
Look
and
at that
defensive
slow.
options.
Look at it.
Heal will now grant more health to the healed ally and less to the user.
Woo!
And Ignite
Is this hype or what?
retuned to be more effective in the early game. And
Look at this Ignite damage.
One idea we're thinking about for 2022.
Okay, so to sum it up, these summoner spell changes are I did these summoner spell changes. They are a little bit less like they're the Ignite one is like a little bit less impactful than it probably sounds here. The numbers are not that different. But the big things are like, look, we noticed that players don't really want to use heal as a selfish summoner. They'd rather use barrier or exhaust. That's totally cool with us. Let's just turn a heal into a supportive summoner then. We don't really have any of those, right? It's like and the exhaust changes are mostly to make it more noticeable. It is intended to be a little bit power up because exhaust right now is actually not that powerful for most people. But it's not intended to be significantly that different. It's mostly just intended to make the slow like a little bit more noticeable and make it so that there is a window where it's like very easy to land a skill shot or whatever on someone because the slow is larger at the beginning. Anyway, so that's the thoughts on the summoner spells. Overall, the Ignite changes are like numerically not that large.
Next patch, we're hoping to have some updates on map vision, and we're also looking at the impact of our current rune set. Which system should we look at next? Leave us some suggestions in the comments.
Leave me some suggestions in the comments in my Twitch stream right now.
The next season will soon be underway, and that means there's a new glorious skin up for grabs. Just make sure she doesn't grab you first. With the start of the new year of
Wait a
rank,
second, was that at level 2? Wait, how is this? Alright, these people are level 2 and this Evelyn's level 5. Things have gone very wrong here.
With the start of the new year of ranked, we're giving the glorious theme a makeover. Glorious Crimson Evelyn is your skin reward for this season. The best is, don't let her flop. Starting with Evelyn, you can also grab what we're calling a weapon augment for glorious skins in the rank store to serve even harder. This visual update empowers the Chosen Champ's source of power to recognize your commitment to the climb.
Ben 100% made Alan say that? Yeah, he did, for sure.
Many mysteries are still left unsolved. Thankfully, we've hired some private expertise as psychic detective Senna is on the case.
This skin looks sweet, actually.
In this wild past, just in time to help us get to the bottom of this mind-bending world. In Champ Select, if you're in the jungle, you'll now automatically be assigned Smite.
Is that hype or what?
You won't face final boss
Auto Smite for junglers?
If you accidentally switched away. We're introducing the News tab. Patch notes, game news, community events,
News tab so you can read the patch notes more easily?
Through the app.
Is that hype?
As we mentioned in January, we're going to be running more events this year with less downtime between each one. But part of that is going to be varying the types of events we run and experimenting with different ways to play. To give you a taste of what's happening later this year in Wild Rift, we'll be revisiting High Noon, Pool Party,
the crab,
Fire, and maybe even further beyond. Further beyond. Further beyond. Sorry, I got distracted. Our biggest focuses this year will be on our shared moments with League PC, like the Lunar New Year. We'll collaborate a few times a year on huge, unforgettable moments with new skins, stories, and more. Those larger events will stay under wraps for now. Now, let's get back to it and showcase some of the skins headed your way in patch 3.1.
Blood Moon Shen? This Warden Karma skin is really sweet, actually. Huge fan. Oh yeah, Pretty Kitty Ring. I actually took this skin in a game in development. I actually had no idea it was upcoming until I saw this video. I thought it was already live. You can change your summoners, I believe, after it just automatically gives you Smite, and if you don't change it, you'll have Smite if you're the jungle role. As far as I know, you can still switch off of it, although I'm not 100% sure how the system works. To answer that one, Chows.
We'll be back in May with more updates and announcements. We wish you good luck on your climb. harness the power of dragons, and get ready to defend Runeterra's connection to the spirit realm. Thanks, everyone,
I
and we'll
hope for
see
pool
you on the
party
Rift.
set. Yeah. Get hyped. All right. Oops. Where did I don't know why I just went there or what I went to, but I can just go back here. Anyway, your thoughts make Gargoyle enchant like PC version? I would love to do that. I think the Gargoyle in Wild Rift is some nonsense. Um, Not a big fan. Um, anyway, so that's the whole video. If anybody has any particular questions about stuff in the video that are like not things, not asking questions like what are the stats on Hullbreaker or stuff like that. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you that, but um, yeah. For me personally, I like champions in game like Azir and Rise because I like the characters in lores, not because of their kits. Yeah, that's understandable, right? I mean, they're interesting characters in the lore, and then unfortunately they have kits, right? It's like, I mean, the worst example of this is Aurelion Sol, right? It's like, Aurelion Sol rates so highly on every feedback survey in terms of thematic, and then his gameplay is just a zero, right? Like it's just, you know, what are the stats on Hullbreaker? Stats on Hullbreaker are 600 AP and minus 400 health. That's actually the Hullbreaker stats that we're going with in patch 3.1. We'll be doing some tuning based on player feedback, but we think that this will actually separate the great Hullbreaker users from the good Hullbreaker users. Why the rapid fire cannon passive doesn't work with Rengar Bush passive? Because that's not how Rengar's passive works in Wild Rift. It does not scale off of his attack range. Um, let's see. That's sick. That's cool. Thank you. Yeah. I thought people would really like that. Is Mord or Volley a possibility? You'd have to ask Roguefool, but they both seem like pretty reasonable ads to me. Um, you know, any mini runes from PC you want coming to Wild Rift except Demolish? I think there's a number of good like small runes that could come in from PC. I think off the top of my head, um, it's hard to name like what exactly minor runes are good. It's like I think. Oh, thanks for the follow, Lemons. I think Scorched, Nullifying Orb, Nimbus Cloak, Ultimate Hunter. Uh, let's see what else. Like Magical Footwear. Uh, what else would be good? I could see Cut Down. Uh, what else? There's probably a lot. Like there's probably like I'd have to look at the actual runes list, but I think there's a good number of minor runes in PC that are just like good minor runes that we could just do. Honestly. uh, if we found the right space, the right time. Um, Hex Flash. I don't know about Hex Flash, Rogue Fool. I'm a little bit suspicious about that one. I like Hex Flash a lot, but that one seems a little more tech intensive. New runes slash changes are always great since they keep the game fresh for everyone, not just specific champs classes. Yeah, that's basically the argument that I've made that we should spend more time working on active items because the active item system is accessible to everyone also, right? I've made that argument before of like we should spend more time working on active items because of that, because it's accessible to everyone every game. But yeah, I generally am in agreement with that for sure. Um, isn't Ultimate Hunter similar to Soul Stealer? Yes, it is. It is quite similar to Soul Stealer, but I actually think there's room for that, like two of those that type of effect for sure. Um, are any attack speed runes ever going to be added? It seems to be the only stat you can't get from runes. It's definitely possible that we might add attack speed, but I think if we were going to make attack speed, we probably would want to make something a little bit more interesting than like PC's Alacrity, because PC's Alacrity is literally just like get attack speed and then get more attack speed as the game progresses, right? Not necessarily the most interesting way. I personally would not mind having attack speed in the system, but I'd want to do something a little more interesting than that, at least from a personal perspective. Let's see. Don't you feel like Hullbreaker brings an unfun mechanic rat, which is already obnoxious to split pushing champs like Set and Trend? Having two or even one towers down already feels like a hard comeback. I mean, the Wild Rift map is really small. Doing the like full rat Dota strategy is like quite difficult in Wild Rift because of how small the map is. Like people can cross to your lane even from the other side of the map very quickly, right? Like it's the Dota like what makes the rat strategy in Dota so powerful is that the map is huge, right? Dota's map is much larger than PC's map even, and Wild Rift's map is smaller than PC's and Dota's by a very large margin. So the pure rat strategies are just much harder to make work. It is possible that these strategies are like even still not that fun in some cases, and that's an accepted cost of like we want split pushing to be viable in some meaningful way. Like we want that to be a functional strategy. That's why we're making Hullbreaker. So we know there's a cost to be paid for that, and it's possible that the cost is too high and that we might want to make adjustments. But for now, we're going to move forward with Hullbreaker as it is. How about Shield Bash from Resolve Tree? That's ultra cool. Actually, I'm not a big Shield Bash fan. Actually, I really dislike Shield Bash actually, overall. Like, I think it's very unappreciable, and it also like kind of restricts choice for champions with shields, like champions with repeatable shield effects. It kind of basically takes all their choice away. Like for example, Shen in PC, it's like Demolish should be good on Shen in PC, but because Shield Bash exists in that drawer, he basically has to take Shield Bash. Like he's tuned around the fact that he takes Shield Bash for his lane trades, which I really dislike. What about Shirelia's battle song? Can it make a difference in the game? Shirelia's is an active item that we could make, but we'd probably have to replace Righteous Glory because the effects are so similar. I think the supportive version of it is probably more interesting than the version that slows at the end, personally. But I'm not convinced that that's like something that's really worth putting a bunch of time and effort into changing. But it's possible. It's not something that we like are fundamentally opposed to. I don't think. At least I'm not. I don't know about my team. Um, let's see. Can you just remove Tryndamere? Yep, he's already. I already removed him. You can personally remove him as well, just using the ban phase. If you would like. Any chance plus heal shield power would be ever be added as an item stat? Heal and shield power literally exists in our systems as a stat, so it's like it wouldn't require any new tech to make. We actually do have the power to do it, but it is something that the designers that made the current enchanter item system decided not to do because of basically low appreciability on, and they decided to put that power elsewhere, right? They basically decided that they would rather have the power that could be distributed as a heal and shield power distributed instead into the unique effects on the enchanter items. And I don't necessarily think that was the wrong call, but I do think there's maybe some benefit from having like a small amount of heal and shield power somewhere in some systems, maybe even in the rune system. But it's not something we're looking at right now as like something that we want to do. But it's possible. Should ADC be worried about the new death stance? I don't think so. Will Kaisa get nerfed? Her evolved Q wave clear is actually insane. Maybe. Who knows what's in patch 3.1? Except me. I mean, I know what's in patch 3.1 because, I worked on it. But who knows? I can't say. Thoughts about adding an attack speed keystone to Wild Rift? I think it would be good to have an attack speed keystone in Wild Rift to differentiate from Conqueror. Um, you know, I don't necessarily I don't necessarily have the ability to say like what attack speed keystone would we want to make, or when would we make it, or that kind of stuff. It's like I think it's pretty clear we'd want to take away from the space that Conqueror occupies currently. Do goldfish make you smile? Yeah, I have this here. I'll put the goldfish away. I got this entire giant carton of goldfish to distract me from eating eating all the random stuff that I have. Because now that I've gotten into making like cooking stuff, it's just like even when I'm not hungry, I'm like, I could just cook something right now, and then I just start eating a bunch of stuff. So these goldfish are to distract me from making a bunch of more like burritos and stuff. Let's see. Thoughts on something small leak, please. I'm gonna leak something really big here. There are actually champion changes in patch 3.1. Like we're actually gonna be doing some balance work on champions. I know that's huge. And don't tell anybody that I told you, but that's something that I just really want to leak here. I want AP Kaisa buff. It's so fun. I like AP Kaisa. Um, I like how you're matching Alan's t-shirt in the video. It's not. I think that's mostly the camera angle. Like this is actually a Riot t-shirt. You can see here it's got the Riot logo. It's like actually red. It's not the same color as Alan's t-shirt. Like his t-shirt is like brown. My t-shirt's straight up just red. Um, let's see. Right now, it all comes out right to all amount of turnouts. If ER has 0 dragons, she's likely to need more changes. Yeah, true. Uh, like champ buffs and nerfs, insane. Yeah, there's going to be champion buffs and nerfs, actually. I'm going to take this leak even further. There's going to be both buffs and nerfs in the 3.1 patch. All right. I'm going to switch over to this now because I do have a few things. Let's see. Should we see more lethality build champ like Zaya or Misfortune soon? I don't necessarily think we want to encourage that more so than I've already seen. But let me get through some of these questions. Yeah, Ben's calling me. Yeah. Ben's calling me up. Ben's calling me up. Gotta get away from the phone. Um, so let me get through some of the questions from my Twitter DMs and stuff. I don't have too many questions here, so I can probably get through these pretty quickly. So I'm going to start out with, will there be small rework of Master Yi, Garen, Ari, be same mechanism as PC League? Um, every rework in PC League is possible for us to do in Wild Rift if it's really successful. I think one example I'll tunnel on here. Oh, thanks for the follow. One example I'll tunnel on here is like Garen. Is like we don't necessarily really want Garen, like PC Garen, right? PC Garen's rework came with like it was very successful at the things that it wanted to do, but it also introduced a lot of other problems. We have a successful Garen already that has different problems, and we don't necessarily want to just like switch out the problems that we currently have with Garen for different problems. When we think that we can probably solve the problems we have with current Garen by just like probably nerfing some base damages and buffing some ratios, right? He's also just overall quite strong right now, for sure. But the PC Garen scales with attack speed, and that's really cool for some reasons. It's like, yes, it means he can build things like Triforce, and he can build crit attack speed items, and get value from those, and he can stack Conqueror, right? But these things all have a cost, right? Like, these things have like, for example, the fact that he stacks Conqueror with his spin means that he doesn't have access to the other keystones. He has to be tuned around the fact that his spin applies Conqueror. Therefore, if you want to take another keystone, you're trolling. You should not do that, right? Like, it's wrong to take other keystones. Garen in Wild Rift has like, he can take Phase Rush, he can take Grasp, and even there's situations where Conquer isn't trolling on Garen, right? It's like it's probably not, not his optimal keystone in the majority of games, but he has some actual choice in his keystones, right? Whereas if his spin stacks Conquer, you don't get to take any other keystones, right? And that has a cost. And there's stuff like that. Anyway, TLDR here is like all reworks are possible, but we are considering the like cost and the cost benefit analysis of like we have to spend some time making these changes, we have to tune it, and like what are we getting out of it? So Garen I think is unlikely. Ari seems to have been pretty successful in PC League as a rework, so that's something we should probably spend some time talking about whether we want to do it. But that's something that we talk about with Champs team. I'm really high, and it caused me to think this. Do you feel stressed or similar when you have X amount of viewers and then it starts to drop? This is kind of personal, but my high ass thought about yourself. You keep up the good content, bro. Thanks. But to be honest, the answer is kind of no. I don't really pay attention to my viewers during the stream. I tend to look at like, so after the stream ends, like usually, when I'm just like chilling out doing whatever, I'll look at like the viewer, there's like Twitch has this thing where it's like, I forget what it's called. It's a section called like viewer analytics or something like that, or like Twitch analytics or something like that. And I look at that and I see like, where did my viewers come from that stream? Or, when did my viewers cap out or whatever? It's like, and I think it's kind of fun to look at afterwards, but I don't really worry about my viewers dropping or anything like that. It's really not a big deal to me. It's like, if I have plenty of people chatting to ask me questions and talk to, that's good enough for me. And I was happy to do these streams when I had 7 viewers, right? It's like something that people may not realize is like, my stream got popular like when it got first posted on Reddit, but I had been doing these streams for like 3 months at this point to like 7 viewers for months, right? It's like I don't do this because I have a lot of viewers. I do this because it's fun to talk to people about Wild Rift. So I was one of the 7 viewers. Yeah. It's a good time, and some of the people who used to watch me back in the day still come, and that's cool. Like still come to watch the streams, and that's awesome. I'm really not. I'm not here for the. I'm not here for the big viewership, right? It's like, and to be clear, I'm also not here for the money. I think in total, off of my streams so far, I've made like less than $10. I'd have to check to be sure, but like this is not a profitable thing for me, right? Like in considering the amount of time I've invested, it has not been profitable for sure. There was a like when I had the first really big stream, I think I made like $2 or something like that for streaming for 4 hours or whatever it was. It's like, you know, my time per hour is really not like I'm not here for the money. I'm not here for the money, and I'm not here for the viewership numbers. I'm here to talk about Wild Rift and have a good time. Thanks for the gift sub. Um, let's see. I remember I was the one to ask about Aurelia Jungle back in the day. Yeah. You can get a skin with the $10. True. Maybe I should give back to the Wild Rift community. I should buy a skin. Um, okay, let me get back to the Twitter the questions here. Will Ashe and Wukong be considered to buff because they're very popular champions, but they're not strong enough? Long time no see them in Wild Rift. I mean, that doesn't really make sense, right? It's like if they're popular and like if a champion is popular and weak, that's one thing, but a champion being popular doesn't mean that they're weak. And in fact, it is generally there's an opposite correlation with that, right? Like generally, champions that are more like powerful will be more popular. So it's kind of weird to think about it as like what is the supporting evidence to suggest these champions are weak, right? Like because from every metric that I've seen, every data metric and generally even player perception that I've seen, these champions are not necessarily weak. They might be unsatisfying, right? I know people that play Wukong generally don't like that his build is like a lot more durable than what they'd prefer. Like the optimal build is a lot higher on durability. It's like I think we're more likely to nerf these champions than to buff them. Being straight up about this. Yeah, it's like I don't know. I think the thing I see complaints about on Wukong more frequently is like jungle is better than Baron lane, and his like he tends to build more durability than he builds, or like durability tends to be more optimal than people think that it should be, which I think is fair. When's the Draven buff that makes him one shot the enemy Nexus from Dragon Pit coming? Oh, that's next patch. That's in 3.1. Let's see. All right, so let's get through these. I remember Phlox last year bringing Aurelia rework. Is this considered rework up to Wild Rift? We don't have like a huge motivation to do that rework in Wild Rift. We don't have a ton of problems with Aurelia as she is right now. Um, let's see. Can we get option to use skill as fast button is pressed instead of pressing and releasing? Mostly it would work on. I know there are some. There's been some discussion around changing controls in that way. I am not an expert on that system, but I believe that there may be some small control changes in 3.1. I think not for those spells, but for some things. But we'll see. I know that's something that's been discussed recently, but I'm not an expert on the topic, so I'm not. I don't. I'm not confident in my ability to give a good response to that question. Are magic penetration boots something you want to bring in the future? No. So that is something that I've spent some time talking about on Twitter. I've talked about on my stream previously, but basically having things like attack speed boots and magic pen boots in the system means that if you're a champion that primarily scales with offensive stats, your choice is taken away from you in the system, and you have a potential frustration release valve of things like, hey, this Draven is destroying me in lane, but I can't reasonably afford to buy tabbies because I'm Yasuo. I need to buy Circa Greaves, right? That's how my champion is tuned. I have to buy these offensive boots, or I'm Syndra. I have to buy these pen boots or whatever. It takes away your choices, right? But yeah, I agree, Decoded. I should definitely make frequently asked questions like chat commands. For sure, for sure. Actually, you know what? I'll probably spend some time later today or maybe tomorrow setting up some stream commands for those. That's definitely a good idea. You're 100% right. Um, anyway, let's get back to the questions here in the things. As an ADC main, right now the meta can feel really overwhelming because of how hard it is to space around fighters during the mid stages of the game, and how hard it is to punish them when they play badly because they have high defensive stats. Armor penetration items are supposed to help against fighters, and tanks it's really hard to fit mortar reminder on traditional ADC builds before 2 or 3 crit items. So one thing I'll say here overall is that number one, it is probably a lot more optimal than you might think to just jam mortar reminder in your build very early, even though I nerfed doing that. The reality is that second and third item mortar reminder is really strong on pretty much every AD carry. And so one thing is that like might be noted here is like if you're Tristana and you buy an IE and you're like, I need another crit item to make this IE good, wrong. Just buy a mortal if you feel like you really need it, because that's actually quite strong. Now, the signaling there is not necessarily very good, and that's a flaw of the system that it doesn't necessarily communicate well that armor pen is pretty much always good. Like Mortar Reminder is just a really strong item, but the reality here is like if you're looking for a quick fix, Mortar Reminder is just really strong, and you should just buy it if you feel like you need it, like pretty much whatever slot. Um, Number two, I think it is fair to say that like armor pen doesn't necessarily feel good, and I think that it would make sense for us to add an armor pen item. I swear this wireless headset's more trouble than it's worth. It keeps turning off because I don't have anything. It's because I don't have any sound playing. It's like you're not using the wireless headset. We should turn off to save battery. Anyway, to try and get back on my train of thought here, I think it would make sense at some point for us to eventually make a crit armor pen, like crit percent armor pen item, because I do agree it's like it does feel weird and the signaling is not particularly good on Mortar Reminder, where it's like I think it would be good if we had an option that felt better for a crit marksman to buy as a second item for percent armor pen. But the reality is that currently, if you buy Mortal Reminder second item against a bunch of people that have a bunch of armor, you'll have a good time. Like it just works. Like it may not feel the best, but it is powerful. Like you can just do the math on like how much armor pen you're getting and how much DPS you're getting out of the armor pen. Like go spreadsheet the math. Trust me, it does a lot of damage. Anyway, so that's sort of my thing here is like I think it is fair to say that this feels bad. The current system does offer release valves for this, but I agree that they're like not in a great spot in terms of like the signaling and the feelings, unfortunately. Um, will Bloodthirster get nerfed because Graves with this item is OP and Grievous Wound doesn't really affect Graves? So no, we're not going to nerf Bloodthirster because of Graves. We'd be way more likely to nerf Graves. It's like if Bloodthirster Graves is OP, which isn't necessarily something that we agree with 100%. It's like Bloodthirster is certainly Graves' best first item from our perspective, but if Bloodthirster Graves is OP, that doesn't mean that Bloodthirster is OP, right? It's like it's not like other people are. It's not like there's 10 champions out there that are all buying Bloodthirster first and running over games, right? It's like if Bloodthirster Graves is OP, that's a Graves problem, not a Bloodthirster problem. So the fact that like Grievous Wounds doesn't really affect Graves also just isn't true. Nerf Bloodthirster Alley, yeah, Bloodthirster Alley needs a huge nerf for sure. Okay, I have nothing here, nothing here. Oh, I have here. Okay, support gold buff, please. Feels bad that my gold is directly tied with my ADC's ability to last hit. So I did an investigation on this a little bit into the math. The margins are really thin. It was very difficult for me to come up with a pitch for reducing the amount of gold you get from AD carry last hitting without significantly changing some mechanics. I did actually want to do a lightweight, like no, like not significant, like just tune some numbers here and there to like up passive income slightly for supports and lower the amount they get from AD carries. But I basically, because the margins are so thin right now, I found it really, really, really difficult to come up with a number that would feel meaningful for supports that would not run into issues in other parts of the system. So I think basically the summary of the investigation that I did was basically we need to change some mechanics here if we want to make supports a little bit less dependent upon their AD carries last hitting well, which is number one, a thing that I do want to do. Number two, though, changing those mechanics behind the scenes, the gold generating mechanics, is very, 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 very like risky, right? Like any kind of gold generation mechanic change, like is obviously going to be dicey and probably require a lot of testing. So I would like, for with the explicit goal here of like supports probably shouldn't be as dependent upon their AD carry last hitting well. I would like to make that a little bit like I would make it a little bit. I would like to make it a little bit less true, but or a little bit less true that they're dependent upon their AD carry last hitting well, but the margins are thin and it's difficult for like I don't think that I can reasonably make a a change there without new mechanics. I don't want to hear a Rogue Fool. I hear about it every day. Uh, anyway, Rogue Fool has a pitch he likes to talk about. But we can't talk about that. That's potentially upcoming content. So uh, we'll see how that goes. Sorry. Let's see. I don't think supports are suffering because their ADC isn't last hitting and given the 5 extra gold per cannon. So especially if you're a higher MMR player, this probably isn't a problem for you. But for like the average player who plays in random MMR, this is a frustrating thing for supports. Is that if their AD carry just doesn't last hit well, they just lose out on a bunch of gold and they get to be poor for like basically no real reason, like nothing that's under their direct control, right? Um, the problem statement here is not like high MMR players. Like to be clear here, it's like if you're a professional level player, I don't expect this to be a problem for you, right? Or you're in like high diamond or masters or whatever. It's like this is this change with like that I want to make is not targeted at you, right? If you're like higher MMR player. This is targeted for the average player, where sometimes you'll just get queued up with an 80 carry that just doesn't last hit very well, and you'll just miss out on gold, and that feels really bad. And it's like it's not your fault, right? It's like I want to make that less impactful on you, basically. Um, that's the problem statement, right? It's like to be 100% clear here, this is like the motivation for me to investigate that data was not because of 100% of the player base. It's for like probably 60 or 70% of the player base. That's just like not good enough that their 80 carries on average last hit every minion, right? So um, Okay, let me get back to the questions here to answer through these. Will increase number of stacks of Conquerors, although many runes were buffed in patch 3.0b, but Conquerors still conquer Wild Rift. I personally would like to increase the number of stacks to make this rune less generic, but we would need other options for champions in place before we did this, because currently Conqueror is covering some holes in the system that like 80 carries don't really have many runes and fighters don't really have many runes, right? It's like we would need some other runes to sort of share the burden of this space to increase the number of stacks to make Conqueror less generic, but I would like to do that at some point for sure. Not something that's guaranteed to happen, but it's something that I personally would like to do at some point. Dragon new spawns rate will make the game longer like PC. Our goal is not to extend game time. We would like to keep the game time about what it is now. When my ADC is bad, really bad, I just roam, but sometimes I get gold starved though. Yeah, that can definitely happen. Um, what if we got Ultimate Spellbook at Wild Rift? I liked Ultimate Spellbook. I thought that mode was really fun. So I would like to do that. Although I have no idea. That's a better question for Roguefool. He's on the modes team, not me. Um, will there be more adjustments to shift certain champions from the jungle to Baron lane? Personally, I don't feel like Tryndamere belongs in the jungle, especially when Master Yi exists. It's something we've spent a lot of time talking about. There may be systemic changes to address more of that in the future, but we'll see. But basically, like auto attack DPS characters, especially melees, have generally been really favorable in the jungle. Champions like Tryndamere and Jax, for example. That is something that we've been taking a look at systemically, like what can we do about that? Because that's just like a feature of Wild Rift's jungle, more so than the champions themselves, right? Brand jungle, please. I would like to do brand jungle buffs, actually. That would be sweet. Wild Rift Twisted Treeline. I don't know about that. I mean, I personally enjoyed the occasional game of Twisted Treeline, but I understand why PC cut it, right? It's like it was really not popular relative to the cost of maintaining it, right? It took a lot of QA efforts to maintain the mode and a lot of bug fixing to keep that mode up. So I certainly understand why they didn't keep it around. Are respawning inhibs not a thing to keep game time low? No, respawning inhibs would extend game time. So that's the main motivation for not having respawning inhibs, is to make sure that games end in a certain amount of time. I don't know why Phantom Dancer is bad, even for ADC. I replace it with Death Stance. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. Phantom Dancer being a crit AS item, like the shield item being a crit AS item, we know from PC making a shield bow that we're more likely to get a broader user pool for a shield AD carry item if we put AD on that item, right? I don't necessarily know if we'd want to put lifesteal on it, but AD is probably a more direction if we wanted it to be more broad of an item for AD carries. A lot of Vainglory players enjoyed 3v3, might be more popular for Wild Rift. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting thought experiment. I mean, it's something we could experiment with at some point. Again, it's more of a Roguefool question than me because I'm not on the modes team, so that's him. Why don't you replace some runes with more useful ones? I would like that. I would love to replace runes. That would be something I would love to do for sure. Let's see. Wait, Phantom Dancer has lifesteal on PC. So they have their shielding, like their lifeline 80 carry item has lifesteal and 80 on it. But it is also a mythic, which is quite different from the current system, like from the system that we have in Wild Rift. So their Phantom Dancer is a different item. Like their Phantom Dancer does not have lifeline on it. It's a completely different item. So It's a pretty different item. It's not this is quite the same. It's like Maw and Wild Rift. Yeah, it's like kind of more like Maw than Phantom Dancer, I guess, but it also has crit on it. Can you guys just do the thing to make the thing better and remove the bad thing that make the things worse? Yeah, we're on it. We're doing that. Oh, the shield bow. I thought PD. Yeah. I'm talking about shield bow, right? Like they're like equivalent lifeline item. Can we get runes changes like last year? What rune changes are you talking about? I'm actually not sure. Let me get to this question. When making balance adjustment, does balance team refer to CN server data because many champions are very strong in CN server and still have not been nerfed? Yes, we use CN data. We use CN data and we use we actually have the data in separate pools. We call it CN and we call it ROW, which refers to rest of world. Um, we have them split into two categories actually, and we do use both sets to balance. So we do balance using the players from every region, including China. And China data is obviously very, very, very high sample, therefore very good for determining large sample sets, stuff like that. So yes, we do 100% use China server data. The reality is that there are champions that are perceived as strong in CN server that may not have been nerfed, but the reality is that we do nerf something if it goes over our thresholds in any region. So, are there big differences in the two sets of data? There are some things that are like weirdly different. Like there are a few champions that have different win rates, but not significant. Like most data is pretty much the same. There are a few things that we've been looking into, like anomalies on like why is this data different between CN and the other servers. But the same is actually true for other servers, right? It's like if you look at like KR data, for example, like the Korean server data, there are some like anomalies there of like this champion is like 2% higher win rate here, or this champion is like way worse in high MMR there, or whatever. It's like, and we don't necessarily have good ways to explain all of those differentials. But the CN data is like mostly pretty similar to the data in the rest of the world. Let's see. Uh, like CN Wild Rift, not center of the country. Yeah, I mean it's just referring to the CN data, like the Chinese like data, the data from the CN server, which isn't necessarily 100% people from China even, right? Like some people will VPN in or whatever, right? Same thing in the other regions. Like not every region's data is 100% their players, right? It's like people will VPN and play wherever, right? Like for whatever reason, they might want to do that. Perception is more different across regions than champion win rate. That is true. Yes, that's a good point from Rogue Fool. Is that perception is very, very, very different across regions. Champion win rates are a lot closer. There are a few that are like a few percentage points off, but generally speaking, it's the perception is very, very, very different than it is across regions. Like for example, in CN, people think that like for example, when Yasuo like in other regions is like considered to be a okay or decent champion right now. It's like CN generally doesn't think Yasuo is particularly good, right? Like think he's weak overall, right? Has been my perception of the current sentiment data. Although I'm not the person who collects the CN sentiment data, so I just sort of get that from other people. Oh, I missed a cheer 15 minutes ago. Apologies, but thanks for the 1-bit cheer and thanks for the follow. Le Petit Morn, 1982. Is TF and CN SSS tier? Not as far as I know. I think he's played there in their pro games as well as I know. I haven't been keeping up with the CN pro games recently though. I don't actually know if he's been played there recently. Let's see. DB said people don't buy Maw no matter how you buff it because it has the same passive as Sterix and they prefer Sterix. Have you considered changing item passives? So I think the read here is just incorrect, right? It's like yes, it competes with Sterix, and that means that most champions won't ever buy Maw if they have Sterix as an option. I mean, number one, it's not true, right? It's like imagine Sterix cost 100, or imagine like Maw costs like 500 gold, right? It's like obviously at that price point you would buy Maw a lot, right? So it's like obviously there is a point at which Maw is competitive with Sterix, right? Like that's very clear, right? It's like saying that it will never be competitive with Sterix because it shares the same passive is just very clearly not true, right? Because it's like if Maw at its current stat values cost 500 gold, I promise you Maw would be the most purchased item in the game, right? Everyone should buy Maw, right? So it's like obviously there is a point, it's like, and that's obviously ridiculous, right? It's like yes, Maw at 500 gold is like very obviously wildly overpowered, right? But it's like if there's a point where it's very clearly better than Sterix, it's like surely there must be a point where they're more close, right? And it's like maybe we have not, and it's like we probably haven't hit that point yet. And the goal isn't necessarily to get it to compete with Sterax, but it's obviously not true that there's no way for it to ever compete with Sterax, right? Because it's like if it's cheap enough and it's efficient enough, people will buy it, right? Like that's just true. Um, so anyway, the point here is that I'd actually like to make about Maw though is that we don't necessarily want Maw to compete with Sterax in the average game. The goal here is that Maw competes with competes with defensive item slots for AD carries and like potentially some assassins and casters, right? It's like if Zed considers Maw in some games, that's a win for us, right? It's like if if you're a Lucian and you're getting blown up by an Orianna or something or a Ziggs or whatever, and it's like you might want to buy a Maw, that's more where we want that item to be in the current shape of the item, more so than we don't necessarily care if Jax cares about Maw, right? Like that's not something that we necessarily like want to put in competition there. But we more along the lines of like, you know, the Zeds, the Kha'Zixes, the Rengars, the 80 carries, right? It's like Maw is more an item for them as a release valve against strong magic damage burst, right? Not necessarily more competition directly with Sterax. When are we going to get endstep Twitch merch? I'd buy an endstep branded water bottle and headsets that cut out. Yeah. True. Actually, keeping that in mind, let me play this
Hey
video for a
everyone,
second.
Alan here.
That way, my headset will think that I'm listening to something, so that I don't have the headset turn out. Uh, Actually, someone sent me a message. They actually like cut out my when I was holding up the water bottle, like when I was holding up the water bottle like this to my head, they actually cut it out so it's transparent background. I'm thinking about uploading it as an emote to Twitch. It's called endstep hydrate or something like that. Because I can have emotes actually. And I have no emotes, but that could be my one emote that I have. Endstep hydrate, just me holding up a water bottle. So I appreciate that. I forget the name of that person, but someone sent me that. I thought it was pretty hilarious. I had a good laugh about it. Someone sending me the transparent cutout of me holding up my water bottle to my face. Um, let's see. um, can we buff AP Panth? I would like to buff AP Pantheon. That sounds sweet. Oh, okay. I think I've gotten through pretty much everything, right? That was all the stream questions. Yes. I've gotten through all the stream. I didn't have too many for this stream, which is nice. Why did you guys nerf the tenacity on Hunter Titan instead of the absurd health the rune provides? I feel the rune should be getting picked for the tenacity and not the 120 health that tends to overvalue it over other runes by itself. There's a few reasons why we decided to go with the tenacity. One reason, at least, and I can't necessarily speak to what the original designer's motivations were, in terms of like what he decided to nerf there. But one thing is that players value the tenacity, and I think from a personal perspective, I really dislike that there is permanent like passive tenacity in the rune system at all. Um, I actually wish that if we had any tenacity there, it was like heavily windowed, and so from that perspective, I think it makes sense to nerf it in terms of like I don't think that having a lot of passive tenacity in the rune system is actually good for the game because we're actually taking away a lot of the interesting decisions from the boot system, right? The boot system having tenacity as the primary means to access tenacity is like truthfully speaking is like that is what makes the boot system interesting, right? That there are trade-offs between buying things like mercs and buying things like tabbies. And additionally, tenacity is a asymptotically scaling system, and the more of it you have, the more powerful it is. Which doesn't really make sense, especially because we have an additive system in Wild Rift, unlike the multiplicative system in PC. And so buying mercs with the tenacity from Hunter Titan is actually more powerful, which makes no sense. Number one, it's not intuitive. Number two, very few people understand how the math behind that works. I literally gave an entire design presentation on that on Thursday because people don't understand how the math behind it works, and it's very complicated and incomprehensible. And there's just a lot of terrible mathematics that go behind offering small amounts of tenacity anywhere, especially in an additive system like the one we have in Wild Rift, which I would like to change to a multiplicative system. Anyway, that's a whole separate point. But basically, the sort of TLDR answer as to why we nerf tenacity on Hunter Titan instead of health is like the tenacity causes us a lot of problems, and we don't like the fact, like at least I personally do not like the fact that that rune gives passive tenacity at all. If we want tenacity in the rune system, I would much rather have it be windowed. So Anyway, uh, that's my personal take as to why I supported that change. Um, and I don't necessarily think that the health is that absurd, right? 120 health is like most champions have about have in the 2,000 to 2 at level 15. You're talking about 2 to 2.2k health in the late game. So this thing is giving you literally like 5% more health for most champions, right? It's like at level 15. That doesn't seem that crazy to me that one minor rune would give you 5% more HP under the assumption that you have no HP items, right? It's like that's only if you are a mega squishy that has no health items, right? So some default builds on some champions are really, really bad, like Essence Reaver Kaisa and AD Cannon. Why are such bad item builds in the game? Mostly because it's difficult for us to change the. It is time consuming and difficult for us to make changes to the rec item system. I 100% agree. All right, I'm furious about this headset turning off. Anyway, um, so I 100% agree. It would be really good if we could change rec items more frequently, but it's just not something that is currently like worth a ton of time. I will say that I believe I'm not 100% sure about this, by the way, but I believe there should be Kai'Sa rec item changes coming in 3.1 that I submitted ages ago, but it takes a really long time for us to do them, and so it's just like not. It's just very difficult for us to do, and I think we should spend more time on it, but it's just it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort, and so it's difficult for us to keep them updated. But I agree, it's something we should spend more time on. I think it's also something that we're talking about right now as like how we would spend more time on that. How we would not spend more time on it, how we would get it to be a more efficient process to change rec items, because obviously it would be good if we could update the rec items more easily. But we can't currently. Why do you nerf champions like Tryndamere, who nobody can reach Challenger with, but you don't nerf Lee Sin or Evelynn with many players at with tons of champion points? Um, the short answer is we balance for everyone, not just Challenger players. Number two, I am 100% sure that there are people getting to Challenger with Tryndamere. More than one, I'm sure. The champion is just overall strong, like especially in Elite, actually. Uh, like he's just, I mean, he's a low MMR skewed champion, but he's actually just strong enough that he's still good in elite level play. Like win rate wise, his win rate's fine. Um, the reality is that we balance for everyone, and that has trade offs. And it's like it's fine if some champions are better in elite play than others, just like there will be some champions better in lower MMR play than others, right? It's like some champions will just be more powerful than others in different MMR brackets, and that's totally fine. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with that. Thank you for the stream. It's 2 a.m. in Indonesia, but ultra worth it. P.S. Consider buffing Jinx, please, so we can see Jinx and Thresh soon. Please, plus nerf Tenacity and Wildrift. I want to nerf Tenacity and Wildrift for sure. Make it multiplicative scaling. But yeah, thanks for watching, and sorry to hear it's 2 a.m. for you. Apologies. About the runes, I was talking about the runes like Kleptomancy to Phase Rush, etc. It's possible we do something like that in the future for sure. For sure. I would love to. What a plug for that headset merch. True, true, true. Yeah. My endstep headset that just turns off randomly. Um, anyway, let's see. I've been streaming for about 2 hours at this point. I'll probably give this another 15-ish minutes, just chill out, answer some more questions, and then I'm going to go get something to eat. I actually haven't eaten yet today, so I'm getting a little hungry here, but I'll give it about 15-ish more minutes, and then I will call the stream. But yeah, I will probably keep reviewing the chat. Let's see. Isn't it better to just invest unchanging the interface for the runes and add more runes? It depends. Like it depends. Like some of it is some of like what we want to do with runes is going to depend on what the artists tell us or what the UI people tell us about like how they can change the interface versus like adding like is it better to like do we want to add more runes and take and eat the cost of like changing the UI? Do we want to swap in new runes? It's like it depends on what the UI people tell us, which we've already been talking to them, but I cannot tell you anything about that. Is there any plans to rework or replace loyalty? I hate loyalty. I would love to change loyalty out. But I cannot tell you about our plans for any of the rune system, or really any system upcoming. But I will say I do not like loyalty at all. I hate it. Let's see. Have you guys considered changing Champion's base movement speed for balancing at all? We haven't seen any more base movement speed changes since the 1.x cycle, if I'm not mistaken. So base movement speed is always on the table for us for balancing, but it's not something that we like really want to use that often. I mean, even if you look at PC where they change base movement speed more frequently, you don't really see base movement speed changes that much, right? Like maybe like probably like once every like 3 or 4 patches, right? It's like I don't think we're super interested in changing base movement speeds. Though I will say there was a designer at one point that had a pitch to just buff all champion base movement speeds to make champions move faster, which I thought was funny. It's also an interesting pitch. Something we could maybe do at some point. Uh, but obviously the map is already small. So of course moving around the moving champions faster, of course, makes the map relatively even smaller, right? Since the map is all relative to champion speed. Anyway, champion-based movement speeds are always on the table as a balancing lever for us, but um, it's just not something that comes up super often for us because we're pretty happy for the most part with the movement speeds that like the base MS that champions have. And Civ is our least loyal designer. True. Let's see. I just want Wild Rift item to have any lore. For example, Exali Seed Jar. We want to know more about item lore, please. The item lore of Exali Seed Jar is that Rogue Fool built the seed jar with his bare hands, and then he put seeds in it. Got him. I can see the stuff, by the way, Rogue Fool. It's just that I'm like kind of behind on the chat because of like trying to answer the questions more thoroughly. Let's see. How has the lethality item rework from last patch worked out in the data? It's done pretty much exactly what we wanted. Maybe a little bit less magnitude. Oh, thanks for the bits. Uh, but what was I saying? I lost my train of thought. Oh, the lethality item changes basically did like they did what we wanted to do, but maybe magnitude wise could have been a bit larger in terms of like reducing the power of the Dirk spike, increasing the power of the completed item spikes, and making Edge of Night like relatively worse, especially as an early item. It did all those things. It's just that I think magnitude wise, it would have been nice if it was a little bit larger, but we were looking for something small, so the fact that we got something that was a little bit smaller than what we're looking for is totally fine. Have you ever considered nerfing the movement speed from spawn to make recalling or dying cost more for those that died to make them lose a little bit more CS? Um, I don't know. We've been discussing recently around like what's the appropriate amount of like home guard power and stuff like that. It's not something that I have like that I'm gonna tell you like this is what we think or like this is what changes we're gonna make. But it's something we've been talking a little bit about recently about like, hey, when should like what costs should players be paying for dying at X time? It's something that we've spent a little bit of time discussing recently. Um, I have had this bug on my iPhone 13 Pro Max ever since I switched phones 4 months ago. When I use two abilities back to back quickly, the game thinks I'm swiping instead of pressing them separately. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I don't really know anything about that. That sounds like like a feature of the phone, right? I'm not really an expert though, to be honest, so I'm not entirely sure. Let's see. Are changes to passive XP on the table? Level 2 junglers AFKing and brush for level 3 feels super toxic. Changes to passive XP are definitely on the table. We have been talking a little bit recently about like passive XP, passive gold, like whether those are at the appropriate levels because our current perspective is that they're probably slightly too high, like in terms of people in the game overall are very, very, very close in XP and gold on average, like closer than we probably think is correct. So passive XP is something that we have been considering nerfing, not something that I'm going to tell you like, oh, we're definitely going to nerf it in X patch or whatever, but it's like something that we've definitely discussed for sure is like we probably think it's on the high side, or we think it is probably on the high side currently. What do you think Singe needs to feel more fun? I don't know. Probably a new kit would be my guess. Uh, Sad to say, but I think probably a lot of his spells are not the best. But I think that's something that maybe Champ's team could talk about as like, we would love to see a Singe that that has better gameplay that people actually enjoy. So the reality here is that hey, if we saw a change list for Singe that, or if someone came up with a change list for Singe that we thought would make it more fun, we'd probably try and do it. Why is Camille nerfed so hard again and again? Mostly because she's really strong and people keep winning with her even when we nerf her. That's the main reason I would say. So honestly, like being real here, like realistically speaking, uh, Camille is like mostly nerfed for pro/very high MMR players. We understand that she's maybe not the best already for average players, and we'd like to do stuff about that. Like we've gotten some good mileage here. Like the last nerf we or one of the not the I think this was the last time we changed Camille. I don't remember if it's exactly the last one, but the nerf where we or the nerf where we nerfed her passive and like her cooldown and gave her health per level, that actually increased her win rate pretty significantly for most players. So like that's the kind of stuff we would like to do more of, where we reduce the amount of like complicated optimizations that make her powerful for really skilled players, but increase her power for the average player. We would like to do more stuff in that vein. But you know, we've had one very successful change there already, and we could probably use one or two more of those. Okay, let me scroll down. Sorry, I am whew, I'm a little bit behind on the chat here. Many active items don't have a lot of tuning, but price is a great one. Yeah. So talking about the active item stuff is like, there's definitely some things that I would like to do for active items. I am working on a large pitch for active items right now. I want Pantheon pre-nerfed E, not the turret blocker, the 2.5 second one. Pantheon is what he is. Sorry. I don't think we're very likely to change Pantheon E. Does Sterak's boost Triforce damage? I thought the reason Camille's super strong was because of the autos just bursting 700 true damage every 4 seconds off 2 AD items. I don't think that interaction really has anything to do with Camille's strength, to be honest with you. I think if Sterak's literally did not exist, I don't think that would actually significantly impact Camille's power. So. Now, if only Teemo Shrooms could interrupt dashes, that's a spicy change. I don't think I've ever heard anyone suggest that. Let me think about that for a second. So, like, let's suppose Teemo Shrooms interrupt dashes. Where do you put them? You just, like, surely just drop them on yourself in combat, right? Or, like, right next to yourself in combat so that people can't dash on you? Do you just, like, set up, like, a fortress around yourself so that people can't dash on you? It's kind of a funny idea. It doesn't seem like a good idea, but it does sound funny. Hmm. It's interesting though. I actually think there's a lot of potential interesting like things that we could add to the game of like interrupt stashes. Teemo Shrooms does not seem like the place to put it though. Aren't some champions designed to be better in higher levels of play? Okay, like Lee Sin, that should be fine when he's low win rate in low elo games, similar to how Master Yi's strong in low elo and pretty weak in high elo. It is okay for those things to be true to some extent. Not necessarily saying that Lee Sin was like specifically designed for higher elo, right? Like, because you know, back when Lee Sin was designed, you know, in season 2 in PC League, or I guess he was designed partially in season 1 in PC League. You know, he wasn't really being designed for a specific set of players because they didn't do that back then. They just like threw random stuff on a champion kit and they were like, this seems cool, let's just do that. But anyway, in terms of like, it is okay if there are variances in power between brackets, but there's limits to how far champions are allowed to deviate between brackets, right? Like for example, here is like Camille has probably like Camille, especially before we did the health per level slash passive changes that actually brought up her win rate for most players and down for elite players. She was definitely getting to the point where she was so far apart that it was like she was like kind of like borderline unplayable for most players while still being like OP for higher MMR players and pros. That is a point where we don't want to. Like it's okay if a champion is like weaker for some players and strong for another, but it's a problem if a champion is both like OP for some players and then like unplayable for others. That's too extreme, right? Like that's a problem because that means that we just can't really balance that champion. So that's where we would like kind of want to bring them closer together. It's okay if they're different. It's not okay if they're too different, right? Like if they get pushed like really far apart. Good morning, Nick. Good morning, Alex. Teemo Shrooms creating a grounded area like Casio would be cool. I don't think that would be cool. I don't think that would be very cool at all, actually. Hey, I have a question. Will you guys ever add the latest Janna changes to Wild Rift, faster Q Tornado particularly? I think that is unlikely. Our Q Tornado is already faster than the original, like than the PC version that they changed. Like let's look at something here real quick. Hold on. So let's go to Lolalytics here really quick. And go to Janna. So let's look at Janna's pick rate overall comparatively to her win rate. I'm just using this as external PC data, by the way. Just not saying that this is like 100% reliable or whatever. But let's see. So why did they change this website? Why is this website less usable than last time I was here? So I know these win rates are inflated. She's 6% pick rate while being like ranked as one of the high. Like this is not a particularly high pick rate considering how powerful she is, right? Like, and I know this win rate's inflated, but like just as an example of like using from PCs, like her pick rate has not gone up significantly relative to how much more powerful she is. So like my expectation here, and I told this to August when he was working on those Janna changes originally for PC, is like I don't think that the reason why people played Janna more in the olden days was because she had these specific properties around being this shield bot or that her Q was snappier or anything. It's like the reality is that when Janna was more popular in the olden days of PC League of Legends, when she was actually like picked quite a bit frequently, she was also just overpowered. Like something that I think a lot of people don't realize is that in the olden days of League of Legends, like if you go back to pre like season 6, season 5, like before then, PC League did not used to have good standards for balancing. Like there were just champions in the game that were just very overpowered for years, right? Years, literally years, right? Like champions like Rumble and Janna just sat at like 56+% win rate for years, right? Like, and so like this idea that like Janna was more popular in season 3, 4, and 5 back in the olden days because she had like faster Q speed or whatever is like to me was really suspicious because that also coincides with the time when she was also just like very overpowered. And it's like, to me, I'm kind of skeptical. I'm like, well, was she actually popular because of these kit properties or was she popular because she was just overpowered? Right? Like, that's like more where I was, and so I'm a little bit suspicious. Like, and looking at the PC data now, and it's like I'd have to look at our internal data to get a better idea, and I'd probably want to talk to SRT and GAT, like the people who do work on this stuff on PC to get a better sense of this. But like my perception is mostly that I don't think the Janna rework on PC has been a slam dunk success, and so I don't know how likely we are to want to do it in Wild Rift. But I could be totally wrong, right? Like that data that I just looked at externally is not necessarily the most accurate, so I would need to dig into that more with like GAD and SRT, the teams that actually work on that stuff in PC. Are there any plans to release an API? No, there's no plans to release an API. Let's see. I would like for Ezreal's Q to deal AoE damage scaling off AP. That would make some cool hybrid fun. I agree, that would be cool and fun. It also sounds kind of messed up. Are there any plans to buff Kale? Not currently, no. Let's see. Janna top, no counter, just FF. Sag. Let's see. I would buy this, but I played other mobile games like Clash Royale where the official APIs are standard for competitive learning. There are lots of pros and cons to having an API. One of the cons is that it would be a lot of effort for us to set up. That's not the main reason why we're not doing it, to be honest. There are a lot of pros and cons. Again, I talked about this previously, so I'm not going to get super into it. It's like my personal stance is I would like to have an API, or I would not mind it. It's like I'm not strongly against an API, but it has been decided that at least for the time being, we're not going to have one. I don't know if it's a topic we're ever going to revisit in the future, but I doubt it. I think it seems unlikely. Has there been any thoughts for Clash using the guild system? I don't work with the guilds people, so I have no idea. But I'm sure it's something that they've talked about. Let's see. Do you think Janna is secret OP right now? Tourney win rate is the highest out of any champ. Tournament win rate is like not really indicative of champion power. The sample size is just so small, so I wouldn't really take that as indicative of anything. Like we certainly don't, PC certainly doesn't use, like pro win rate for anything, and I certainly wouldn't in Wild Rift. Since I'm the person who does most of the data pulling for Wild Rift Pro data and the one who comes up with the suggested changes for Pro for Wild Rift. I certainly never use win rate in there. Nightbringer Yasuo, please. I would like to do Nightbringer Yasuo. That's a sweet skin. Can you ask Maddie to rush my Alawi? I miss her in the game. You know what? I'll have to tell. So Shiki's the one who really likes Alawi. He's a producer. I'll have to let him know I had a player on my stream who actually wanted Alawi. I've never had that before. Never had one of those. Maybe actually, you know what? This is suspicious. I don't believe that you're not Shiki actually. Provide proof that you're not Shiki, or I'm going to assume that you're just Shiki on a hidden Smurf account, trying to convince me that there's more than one person that wants Alawi in Wild Rift. Anyway, so let's see. What about Black Cleaver Corki really broken? Well, we'll see. Will we ever get esports skins from PC like SKT Jin? I don't know. I have no idea what they have plans for esports for like icons or whatever. It's like I don't think they have anything planned like that, but I'm not sure. No idea. Um, anyway, I think I'm gonna call the stream here. So if anybody has any last questions, I'll give you another few seconds to get your questions in. Why is champion score capped based on ranked? I have no idea. I don't know how that system works at all. But couple, I'll take a couple more questions, and then I'm gonna call the stream so I can go get something to eat because I am really hungry. Um, Why is Cloud Drake going to be deleted based on it being a hidden stat, even though Infernal works very similarly, not actively seeking the damage increase it gives? Because players actually want the damage increase, even if they can't necessarily feel it. Like players, basically players attach more on the fantasy of the damage, more so than the fantasy of the movement speed, and so it is more of a driver for action than the Cloud Dragon movement speed. And the point of the dragons is to be drivers for action that players are excited about. So if players aren't being driven to action by a dragon, or they're not excited about something, those are good reasons not to do those things. And since Cloud Dragon is both, those are both good reasons not to do Cloud Dragon. Um, Even though it's objectively powerful, right? It's like there's like functionally speaking, there's nothing wrong with Cloud Dragon. It's just that most players don't really appreciate the power it gives. All right, well that's gonna be the last one here of turn off of my headset. So is Stu bannable from LPL if us viewers don't get viewer games? Sag? Yeah, Stu's bannable. Uh, Have Riot ever thought about adding plates to turrets? I feel like current turrets are very weak. Turrets do have plates. I mean, they don't have temporary plates, they just have permanent plates. Thanks for the follow. Do you think smite stealing is necessary for modern LoL? Seems stupid, unhealthy. I think there are some good things and some bad things about smite steals. Um, I think overall it's not a necessity. I think there are some good high moments that it provides in the game and some really interesting tension. But there are also some negatives to it for sure. And I think there's probably some interest. I mean I've been a part of some interesting debates both on PC and on Wild Rift as to whether like smite stealing is actually good or bad for the game overall. It definitely does some good things, but it definitely does some bad things as well. But since I need to go eat soon, I'm not going to get super into that discussion. But I will say this like something that has like there are definitely people on both sides of the debate in terms of the design at Riot. So that's something that it's not something that's like everyone at Riot is like smite stealing is awesome. It's like people think that there are like some upsides and downsides to that. Are you actually are you able to comment on Black Cleaver Corki and the debate once and for all? I don't. I do remember looking at the data for Black Cleaver Corki, but I'm gonna be real with you. I don't remember what I found. But I did take a look into the data, but I don't remember. I know I didn't find something that was like super shocking. So because I would remember that, but I remember looking into it and I don't remember what the data said. So apologies. Um, let's see. Have a good brunch. Thanks for answering our questions. Yes, thanks for coming by, and thanks to everybody who watched. What if we can see and follow other people's loadouts, also change skin and pose in loadouts? That would be nice, but not really my area, so I can't really say. Um, anyway, so I'm going to call it here. Thanks everybody for coming to watch, but I'm going to end the stream now. And I'll probably do another stream again for the 3.1 patch notes. Unless I get my double profile set up, maybe I'll do like a Wild Rift gameplay stream or something at some point. But yeah, thanks everybody for stopping by, and have a good one. Hope everybody has a good day and that your headset does not turn off randomly. See ya.